everybody, and welcome today to our Instagram Live. I am just going to invite Rachel to join us, and then we can get started. See. So there we go. Hi, Rachel.
Hi, Sarah.
Yes, so today we are talking about building natural resilience towards stress. And we know that stress is a huge part of 21st century living. So it's really something that we can't escape at all. What we want to cover today is just a few useful tips, a few useful things that people can do, actual achievable goals to help manage their stress. And I'm Sarah. I work at Nutri Advanced in the nutrition department, and we have Rachel Bartholomew joining us. Rachel, do you want to just explain a bit about your journey in towards stress management and helping with stress?
Yeah, so I'm a nutritional therapist. I'm a health writer too. I have my own clinic in Lancashire. I see clients in person and online too. I tend to see a lot of clients with gut, metabolic, and kind of hormonal problems. And then from a writing perspective, I literally write about everything, everything to do with nutrition. I do a lot of writing for Nutri Advanced. I do a lot for my own website. And yeah, so the combination of both of those things I find really helpful. And then I think, it's important to say, for both of us as well, we're both mums, we're working mums. I've got two teenage children. We've both got dogs. I've got a very bouncy Springer Spaniel. I've been, this has been my job now for about 20 years and I absolutely love it, but I don't always get it right, even after 20 years, I live in the real world. And I actually think that learning how to have a healthy diet and lifestyle in the real world is probably the steepest learning curve of all. And I think probably, one of the biggest lessons I've learned is that things don't have to be perfect to be worthwhile, and that any small step you can take towards making things a little bit better is really useful. I always say to clients, never underestimate the power of small steps, because they really can start to sort of snowball, and I think that's probably quite nice to say at the start of this topic of stress.
Definitely. I mean, uh, really, we're looking at why is stress so important, and why is it something that, even if you say that you see a lot of gut clients and things like that, why is it that stress is something that you come back to time and time again?
I think, unfortunately, stress is one of the biggest drivers of 21st century health problems. And it's also something that people find very difficult to do something about. So we have that kind of meeting of something that's a really big factor sitting under a lot of health problems, but something that's a real challenge to deal with. And I think that's why it's such an important topic for us to talk about. I can't think of a bodily system that stress doesn't affect. It affects everything from your hormones to your brain, to your energy levels, to your gut health, to your immune system. There's not a single part of your body that stress doesn't affect. It affects how well you age. It affects, whether you're more likely to put weight on or how difficult you're going to find it to lose weight. It affects your sleep, affects your mood. It can affect insulin resistance. It even affects, can be a trigger for autoimmune. Honestly, the list goes on and on and on. And I'm not saying this to scare people, but I think it's really important at the outset to acknowledge what a big factor it can be. And if nothing else, I think that can become a really powerful motivator to help people to actually start to make some changes. We have to use that information and say, okay, well, yeah, I do need to take action and do something about that. But I'm always really mindful when I'm talking about stress, because the last thing you want to do is to make people feel more stressed. So it's that balance, isn't it, of understanding the impact, whilst also being kind to yourself and acknowledging that, you know what, anything you can do can make a difference. And that's the really important takeaway, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And uh, without giving people another to-do list, basically,
Yeah.
of ticking off everything that they need to do, what are the like easy steps, or what's the sort of like the gold standard, if you like, of helping people who are stressed to bring it back down to a manageable level?
So we know that ongoing stress isn't good for us, and I guess the gold standard is that there has to be an element of actually taking steps to reduce those stresses. That's really, really important. We know that there's going to be some stresses that we can take action to reduce, and there's going to be some stresses that we can't. You know, stress is a part of everyday life, and we can't always control what's happening in our environment. So there has to be kind of that sort of sitting as a sort of a first, layer, really. And when I'm working with clients, and we identify that stress is a factor, and honestly, I'd say 9 times out of 10, it is. It really is a big factor sitting, right at the foundation for a lot of people with, that they might come to see me with a different health problem, but we identify that stress might be contributing. So we're kind of looking at a two-pronged approach, and that the first is really kind of identifying, where is the stress coming from? That's really important to kind of look at where that's coming from, and to start to look at ways that we might be able to, to reduce that. Often, though, I'd say that that often requires like some big lifestyle changes, and that isn't going to happen overnight. It's going to take time to make those big lifestyle changes to try and reduce those stresses. So the second and kind of really important part of that approach is really looking at how can we start to sort of build some resilience against that stress that's happening in your life. And I find that if we can put some some steps in place that sort of help somebody to cope better with stress, that then can help people to make those big lifestyle changes that are needed. So we're kind of thinking about what can we do now to make you feel better? How can we nourish your body with the ingredients it needs to deal with stress? How can we protect your body against the damaging effects of stress? Because we know that stress is very kind of destructive and can be quite damaging to the body. So what can we do now? Yeah, we know it's a stressful environment. What can we put in place to actually, protect and nourish and hopefully sort of help somebody to build that resilience to stress? Now, the big kind of the big gold standard sort of diet and lifestyle changes that we'd be looking at, the first one is always blood sugar balance in diet. That's really a cornerstone of a dietary approach to dealing with stress. And that really is looking at sort of trying to weed out caffeine, sugary drinks and snacks, alcohol, getting some good quality protein with every meal. A big cornerstone lifestyle change would be exercise, active relaxation, finding a bit more joy in your life, self-reflection. All of those big things, I would say, are kind of those gold standard foundational elements of dealing with stress. But I think sometimes even they can be a step too far if you're coming in with a high stress load. The idea of sitting down and meditating every day, or finding time to exercise every day, that can be a leap too far, I think, as a first step. So even though they're the gold standard that we would be working towards, I think really the key is about starting a way back somewhere. I always think of, kind of, we need, you always need to meet your clients where they're at. You've got to meet them where they're at, and that from that point help them to make changes. So I think really it's about the smallest changes. That's kind of where you start.
Yeah, and when you're talking to clients, how do you define where that starting point is for people? Because like you say, some people it's like, you know, making a big dietary change or something like that might just be a stress too much. It might start to become a stress in itself. So how do you find that balance and find that way in with a client to unlock in maybe some of those really small changes that they can make to feel the benefit straight away?
Kind of looking for the smallest change that's going to make the biggest difference for that person, and something that's realistic in that client's life. I ask some really key questions also within the consultation process as well. I'm really interested in understanding which areas of somebody's life are they finding stressful. You know, is it home life, is it work life, is it are they worrying about their health? You know, what's the area that's causing the stress? And then I also ask a lot of questions around, you know, what do you enjoy in life? You know, what is it that, you know, you really love to do? And trying to kind of match those things together. So you know, it might be that it's somebody's got a very, you know, very hectic work day, you know, and they're just not, you know, there's no breaks in the day, they're not feeding themselves well. But maybe that person also is a real foodie and absolutely loves cooking. So for that person, the way in might be, okay, well, let's start with your lunch break, because I know you love food and really enjoy eating food. I know that you love cooking, but actually, you know, perhaps we can slightly reduce, you know, the stress of that work day by just building in a small break at lunchtime, and that's something that you're going to really enjoy as well. You know, for somebody else it might be that they're, you know, they've got really long work commute, and that's really stressful, you know, every morning, every evening, and maybe they love listening to music, or they, you know, there's a podcast or an audiobook that they really like. You know, maybe instead of, you know, just getting stressed on that journey, that we say, okay, well, you know, why don't we kind of try and make that journey a little bit less stressful by you listening to your favorite podcast or putting your favorite audio book on. So it can be something, you know, really small. I say small, you know, if you're not somebody who usually has a lunch break, making time for lunch, it can be that, you know, it might sound quite small, but that can be, you know, quite a, you know, a significant change in itself, and quite a challenge as well. So yeah, just finding that thing, and also kind of, if I hear somebody say, oh, you know, I really should be doing this, that's not the thing for that person. If it's a kind of, I'd love to do this, or I could do that, you know, I'm always a bit kind of beware of shoulds, because it's not likely that if you say, oh, you know, I should do this, it's not, doesn't sound like it's something that lights your fire and that
Yeah,
you're
it's
gonna
not
enjoy.
coming from the heart.
Yeah.
Yeah. I know that's fantastic. And how do you get people to sort of identify some of these micro stresses that they might be, you know, and how do you get them to tune in? Because I think one thing that I've noticed is if I can be more aware of some of these micro stresses and the sort of knock-on effect that they will have, that you'll find that they, you know, you then sort of like it's this cumulative effect where you then notice more events that do trigger a stress, and it can help you to make changes that way.
Yeah, I think the micro stresses are the ones that you can really take action on, aren't they? You know, they're the little stresses that can run throughout your day, that you actually do often have power to change those. You often can sort of go in and do something about those, definitely. And yeah, it's kind of, you know, in terms of, you know, supporting a client, it's just listening very well in a consultation, understanding what a typical day looks like, and just kind of sort of trying to understand where those little micro stresses come in. And sometimes I think, you know, how your day starts can have quite a big effect on the rest of your day. So sometimes that's the way in. You know, if somebody, sometimes encouraging somebody to have breakfast and have a decent portion of protein at breakfast, you know, even if that's the only meal that we work on to start with. Sometimes that if your day starts better, you know, and that kind of, you know, you can, if you get up and then the morning is, you know, a series of coffees and teas and there's no breakfast, and that stress response is just getting more and more and more, you know, if we can kind of interrupt that first thing in the morning and instead get some protein, help to get the blood sugar a little bit more balanced, sometimes that can just set the day off on a completely different tone. And or, you know, sometimes it's adding things in, not taking things away. So, you know, I think caffeine can be a real, you know, something that people reach for, you know, to sort of help them get through the day. But sometimes, like, asking somebody to reduce that might not be realistic right from the offing. So I'll often suggest, well, can we add in a calming cup of tea at some point in your day? And that feels more doable often. You know, okay, we'll keep, you know, we'll keep the tea and coffee, but can we add in, say, a chamomile tea or you know, a nice relaxing tea? And sometimes that can just help to just reset things from that point. I think that very early on as well, I think there is a lot that we can do with nutrients to help that stress response, and to help to kind of, you know, sort of help the body respond to stress better. I think nourishing the body with nutrients, and often, you know, the big dietary changes can take some time to embed, and we can do quite a lot of support with supplements, I think, quite early on.
Yeah, we did have a question come in ahead of this, talking about like what can you do? And I know that sometimes when we're talking to practitioners, or you know, talking about nutrients and getting them in, it's kind of we don't want to stop people from making those big changes, but like you say, sometimes the big changes can feel quite stressful. So sometimes the nutrients and the herbs that you can offer can give them a kind of like just give them a bit of headspace, because it's helping them to cope. So often, I know that when we talked prior to this, we talked about, we're not necessarily always taking the stress away, we're giving people the tools to be able to adapt to those stresses that they will face. And sometimes that's nutrition and herbs, and sometimes that's going to be you know, just sitting and doing one thing, and focusing on that cup of tea. If you're going to have a coffee, you know, sit and enjoy that cup of coffee and experience that cup of coffee, and don't try and be writing to-do lists and looking at your phone and doing all those other things as well. So so I think that that's a really great point about the nutrients. You know, they have that place in re-nourishing people's stores, but also helping them to manage that response as well if they're struggling to do it on their own. Is that something that you talk about in practice as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I do think, you know, our job is to help people to feel better, isn't it? You know, and we want our clients to you know, walk out of the clinic and to start feeling better. And I think that nutrients can really support that quite quickly. Sometimes we've got the foundation nutrients that are used up rapidly during stress, and you know, the biggies like magnesium. We know that it's quite difficult to get enough magnesium in a typical Western diet, and what tends to happen when we're stressed, you know, people stop eating well, they haven't got time to cook a meal from scratch, they reach for the processed convenience foods, they reach for the foods often that are kind of devoid of nutrients. So we do really need to make sure that, you know, at least we are supporting the body with some of those really key foundation nutrients like magnesium. I mean, its nickname is nature's tranquilizer. You know, that is a real sort of tool in our toolkit to kind of just help somebody to kind of to help support a bit more resilience in the face of stress. I mean, B vitamins, we call them our anti-stress nutrients, don't we? Vitamin B5, really important. Vitamin C, I think, is often overlooked in terms of stress. We often think of vitamin C for the immune system, but it's so important for the stress response. Has a big impact on, cortical and stress response regulation. I think vitamin C is a quick win sometimes when you're trying to build something. Very protective as well. We talked about the potential damaging effects of stress, and we want to protect against that, and we're thinking about antioxidants, and so vitamin C has quite a lot of uses, doesn't it, in that space. And then we've got our lovely calming ingredients that can just help to calm. Sometimes it might be the sleep, a lack of sleep is a big stress, so if we can help somebody to sleep better, then that might be the thing that gets things moving. I know you love L-theanine, don't you?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Very good for switching off. And again, just that whole concept of not necessarily removing stress, but helping you cope with that stress. So I don't like the dentist, so I take it before I go to the dentist to help me just bring that stress response down a little. So yes, very helpful. If anyone is listening and they want to talk about nutrients that would be most suited to them and choosing them, you can go on our website and just book a slot with one of our nutrition advisors, and they'll talk about your situation and then help guide you to a particular nutrient that might be helpful. So please do that if you would like to. But yeah, I think let's just finish really with what people can do right now. Are there any steps, like, so people listening now thinking, oh, I should be doing all of these things, but what little take homes can they go away with? Simple things like just taking some deep breaths before you face something, being a bit more mindful. How can people achieve that?
Yeah, so those little steps, that's definitely the way in, isn't it? That's the way in. And if you can go away today and just change one thing, and just do something really simple. One of my favorites is a magnesium bath. I love having a relaxing bath and putting some Epsom salts in there. I think it's, potentially we might be getting a little bit more magnesium, but heat therapy is really relaxing, and we know that can calm the stress response down. So even if you can just do it once a week, that's great. Open the window. We know that nature can be really soothing for the stress response. Even looking at a picture of nature can help to calm the stress response. We know that. So sometimes if I find myself in my office, I think, I've not been outside today, I'll just open the window, and if you can hear the birds or something, even that is just a tiny little thing that might just make a little bit of difference. We've talked about, your lunch break. I think that is often a really good place to start for people. Just considering, what are you having a lunch break, and what are you doing in your lunch break? And if you can just sit and have your lunch without doing anything else at the same time, I would say that's going to be a massive thing. I often say to people as well, a lunch that you have to eat with a knife and fork or with a spoon, it kind of forces you to just do that thing, doesn't it? If you're eating a salad or a bowl of soup, it's much more difficult to do something at the same time than if in a sandwich that somebody can grab and eat on the run. So yeah, I think the calming teas can be really helpful as well. One of my favorites is the classic yogi tea, and it's got cinnamon and quite a lot of sort of the blood sugar balancing kind of nutrients in. And I often do say to, ask people to just add something like that into their day. That, that particular taste might not be for everyone. It might be a chamomile or a different But just adding a cup of calming tea into the day. I mean, I love tea, so that really is something I love, having a hot drink. I think a podcast or an audiobook has become a real favourite amongst people. I find people responding really well to that. I know it's something you love doing as well, don't you?
Yeah. And we were talking previously about how it's really easy to have some barriers. So taking barriers away sometimes is the thing. So yeah, I want to listen to podcasts, but I got a new phone and I don't have the right headphones, so I can't listen whilst I walk the dog. So so that's on my list this week, is to sort my headphones out. So because I know that's a place that I can find some headspace and enjoyment, but also I think, yeah, just the like you said, the finding that time. I think we're so busy in this world that I do a lot of multitasking. I'm very guilty as a busy mum, working mum, got the dog, got to book vets appointments, hair appointments, everything, get the shopping done. So I'm constantly writing lists and things like that. And actually, after we spoke last week, I found it really difficult to just sit and do one thing. So I think it's a really interesting challenge to see if you can just have that cup of tea really mindfully and just do nothing else and let the world wash over you just for even 10 minutes. Most people can find that in their day, to try and achieve something, like either take that barrier away or add something in. I think that's a really great place to be starting.
Yeah, I completely agree. Yeah.
And have you got any, is there anything else that you wanted to add to finish up with, any clinical pearls from your practice?
The biggest thing I think is kind of what we started with, really, which is don't underestimate the power of a small change. Some of the things that we've talked about, you might think, and especially when there's the big stresses, and there are a lot of big stresses that people are dealing with. But don't underestimate the power of just making that one small change, because what tends to happen is it's almost like it sends this message to your brain of like, oh, I can make a change. I can make change. And what I often find is that once somebody's made that one tiny change, they'll come back and they've made like 5 or 6 more that weren't even on the list. And I've done this and I've done this and I've done this and I've done this. And it's like it just starts to snowball, and it really is just about getting things moving again. And really, with stress, what we're looking for is just trying to switch that stress response off. We don't want that stress response turned on all of the time. So if we can kind of interrupt that at some point in the day and help to calm that stress response down by making a change, and then that just starts to empower people. People feel more motivated, people feel more able to make change, at the same time as helping to nourish people with the key nutrients we've talked about. The adaptogens can be brilliant, absolutely brilliant. We've got some brilliant adaptogenic herbs and the mushrooms that can also help to just start to build that real resilience to stress, I think. But if it was one takeaway, I would just say, just find one small thing that you absolutely know you can do, and just do it, and just see what happens as a result of that. Because I think people are often surprised.
Definitely. And it's manageable, and it's individual to every single client as well. Every single person is ever slightly different. So find that thing for you. So if you've enjoyed today, then please do remember that you can book that appointment with our nutrition advisors if you wanted to talk in a bit more depth or a bit more personally, or about a case or something like that. But also, Rachel has written several articles on stress that are on our website. So you can just search in the article section, and you can find some about managing things like Christmas stress and building resilience in general, and and she goes a bit more into detail on some of those points that she's raised as well. So thanks very much for joining us today, Rachel. And
it's my pleasure. Thank you.
yeah, and we'll catch up with you all soon. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Bye.